Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and today we have another episode of my top 10 games. Today I'll be doing my top 10 board games published within the years 2001 to 2004. And I've done some of these videos where I've focused on a 5-year block of time. In this case, I'm particularly focusing on a 4-year block of time, and you might ask why. And the reason why I'm focusing on 2001 to 2004 is because I'm going to make a separate list sometime in the near future for my top 10 board games of 2005. But these years couldn't quite make the cut as far as having their own separate lists, so I lumped them all together. These are the games from the early 2000s that I love the most. So without any further ado, let's move on to my number 10 board game from the years 2001 to 2004, and that is Scarab Lords. And you could also count Minotaur Lords, designed by Reiner Knizia and published by Fantasy Flight Games. If you have followed this channel, you've heard me mention this game before. I think it's a really fun game, either this or Minotaur Lords. This is Egyptian theme, Minotaur Lords is Greek theme, but they play out pretty much the same, and you could actually combine and integrate the two versions with one another in order to add a little bit more variety and have different types of decks. This is the similar type of game, an evolution of games like Shot and Totten / Battle Line, games like Lost Cities, an evolution of that design philosophy that Reiner Knizia was working towards in the late 1990s, where you have this kind of area control and you're using numbered cards in order to see who has the most power on one side or the other of the board. These are strictly two-player only games. The interesting thing here is that he took it to the next level, where these cards also had some player powers, kind of like akin to games like Magic the Gathering, right? Those type of two-player, tactical card games, CCGs, LCGs kind of thing. He also added this element where each card can get played in a different phase of your turn order. You have a phase 0, a phase 1, and a phase 2, and the card specifies which phase these cards can be played in. Also, the cards also specify and delimit what areas within the board you can actually place those cards on, right? So not all cards are created equal. And all of that adds to the tactical and strategic element of the game. Really fun. If you like that two-player, tactical type of card game, this is a great game to play. Underrated. Nobody ever talks about it, but this is my number 10 board game designed between 2001 to 2004, Scarab Lords. Now we move on to my number 9 board game published from 2001 to 2004, and that is Winner's Circle, another Reiner Knizia game. Reiner Knizia was still sitting on his throne back in the early 2000s. This was before, all the surge of hot new game designers came in. There were some good designers back then too, but Reiner Knizia was definitely among the top. And this is a horse race themed game. And this is the company that publishes this now is Dice Tree Games. This was not the original edition. But this is a wonderful game, beautifully produced. At least this Dice Tree edition is. Wonderful board. For the racetrack, you have these cool, really cool pre-painted horse miniatures. And as you can see, they're gigantic. And the detail in the coloring is wonderful, gorgeous. And basically, you're going to randomly assign these different cards to each of those horses. And this determines how they advance based on the die roll. And no horse belongs to a player. Instead, every player bets on 3 different horses, and one of those 3 bets is a double bet, so that's the horse they're most invested into. And basically you get payoffs at the end of the race based on where your horses that you bet ended up in the race and how many people bet on those horses, right? A horse that was bet on by a lot of people isn't going to bring in too much money because they're not considered an underdog. However, a horse that only had a few bets on it would be considered an underdog and would cash you in more money. Really fun, cool game. You could just play one and done, one race. You could play best 2 out of 3. So many different ways to play. I like racing games. I like Reiner Knizia's implementation of it. I like the horse theme. And again, I love the production. My number 9 board game published between 2001 to 2005, Winner's Circle. And now we move on to my number 8 board game, published between 2001 to 2004, and that is Pirates Cove. And this here is designed by Paul Randalls and Daniel Stahl, and it is published by Days of Wonder Games. So as you can imagine, awesome component quality, even by the standards of those days. We have a beautiful board that has all the different maps, I should say all the different islands that you are traveling around as your pirates. And of course, you've got Pirates Cove, which is right here, and this is a safe haven where no pirates can mess with one another. And you've got Treasure Island, where you're trying to, go and dump your treasure to gain victory points, of course. And you're trying to select all these different islands on a given turn. And you're doing that based on what part of your ship you want to upgrade. Your ship is comprised of 4 different sections. You've got your hull here where you have your storage, you have your cannons and your crew, which manage how powerful you are in combat, and finally you got your sails, which show how quick your boats are, and again give you certain advantages when it comes to combat. And based on which of these parts of your ship you want to upgrade will determine what islands you go to. You're also going to see the bounty on each island. Each island on a separate round has a different amount of treasure it gives you, a different amount of coins it gives you, a different amount of victory points it gives you, and even some bonus cards. And based on what island you want to go to upgrade a section of your ship, or based on what the booty is on these cards and what you could potentially gain, will determine what island you choose, because players are secretly at the beginning of each round choosing which island they're going to go to. So you don't know if you might encounter an opponent and have to get into combat unnecessarily so. And in this game, you might have to flee for combat, and if you flee, you give victory points to your opponents, but you might live to fight another day. There is no player elimination, but of course, there are consequences to incurring damage as a pirate. You also have some neutral legendary pirates in the game that move randomly throughout the game, and you have to factor them in as well, because chances are you're not going to beat a legendary pirate if you're by yourself. Maybe if 2 or 3 players are in the same location, they might be able to team up on that legendary pirate, but one-on-one, those legendary pirates are virtually unbeatable. Really cool game with a cool implementation of just gathering resources, scoring points, and also just that fine little, battle that happens quite often during the game, but not necessarily every turn, right? Awesome game. My number 8, I love the pirate theme. Board game design between 2001 to 2004, Pirates Cove. And now we move on to my number 7 board game published between 2001 and 2004. And this is a former Spiel des Jahres winner, and that is none other than Alhambra, designed by Dirk Henn and published by Queen Games. This is a wonderful, amazing tile placement game where you are also drafting currency cards throughout the game. And there's 4 different currencies that allow you to buy tiles in the 4 different corresponding markets. So you're managing that currency, those cards, wisely. You're trying to get tiles, but the orientation of the tiles matters because these tiles have walls on them, and these walls score you additional points, but the walls can sometimes be problematic because they might close you off on one section, and it forces you to focus on certain tiles because only certain tiles will be legally able to be placed on your tableau. Also, you're doing some set collection, right? Because whoever has the most in each of the different colored sets, there's 6 different colors, scores a certain amount of points. And of course, some sets are more valuable than others, right? So not all sets are created equal. Fun game, again, set collection, card drafting, tile placement, lots of neat things going on. There's lots of expansion modules out there for it. Former Spiel des Jahres winner. If I would have done this list a year ago, it would have ranked significantly higher on my list. My number 7 board game published between 2001 and 2004, Alhambra. And now we move on to my number 6. And for many people, this would probably be their number 1 board game published within this time frame. This is another former Spiel des Jahres winner, perhaps the gateway game of all gateway games, and that is Ticket to Ride, designed by Alan Moon and again published by Days of Wonder Games. Days of Wonder was publishing some amazing games back in this time with great component quality. If you're watching this video, there's a very good chance that you've already played Ticket to Ride, definitely heard about it. You can find it at your local Target, your local Walmart, and lots of other, mass market mainstream stores. So I'm not going to belabor the point, but this is a great route network connection game with trains and different maps focusing on different parts of the world. I have tons of content for it, pretty much all of it. I do not get tired of it. Again, this would have ranked higher for me a couple years ago. Obviously, this was one of my gateway games almost 4 years ago. However, yes, I have played other games and it has worked its ways down, but it's still number 6 considering all things, which is not too bad. My number 6 board game, designed from 2001 to 2004, Ticket to Ride. And now we move on to the cream of the crop, my top 5 board games from this time period. And my number 5 is a game that's relatively new to me. I've only been playing it for a few months, and that is Amun-Re, another Reiner Knizia design. And this, I would say, this Egyptian theme game. I love Egyptian theme. You've got auction bidding, you've got area control of sorts, you have resource management, lots of different ways of manipulating things. I would say this is the culmination of Reiner Knizia's auction bidding systems of games. Reiner Knizia in the early, mid, and late 90s was working on tons of auction bidding games, and each one kind of outdid the past one. But right here, Amun-Re outdoes them all. I love the auction bidding system here, copied by other games, where you're bidding for certain locations within Upper and Lower Egypt. And when you bid, you're placing your bidding piece on one of the spots around the location card. And the location card has numbers 1, 3, 5, 6, or something like that, 8. It incrementally increases. And whenever you want to outbid an opponent, it's not just a matter of bidding one more coin. You need to go to the next spot, and the next spot can be 3, 4, 6 coins more than what you are willing to pay for, or what you want to pay for it. So you might not even have the option of outbidding your opponent. This is what the card looks like here. So you could see this is one of the locations. You can see that you have to jump up drastically in some cases, as much as 8 coins in order to outdo your previous opponent. And it's cool because the game is divided into 6 rounds, and every 3 rounds is 1 age. And at the end of age 1, not only do we do some scoring, but we also remove all the human presence, right? The only thing that remains are the pyramids, right? Because you can't undo the pyramids. They're there. They're great wonders of the ancient world. But you remove all your player pieces that indicate control. You remove all farmer tokens that add to the value of that location. And the only thing that factors into the value of the location are those immovable pyramids and stones that you use to build these wonders. And then on the second age, you're bidding for all those locations all over again. And now, instead of bidding blindly or abstractly, now you have some concrete, factors that determine that one location is obviously more valuable than the other. Really cool, really neat. Again, if you like that combination of auction bidding, area majority, some resource management with coins, some manipulation of a market, so to speak, because there is a phase in each round where you make an offering up to Amun-Re, and that offering determines how much your camel caravans pull in. It determines how much your farmers pull in as far as revenue is concerned. It determines a couple additional bonuses that you might get as a player for being the person who was most generous to Amun-Re, and it even determines first player for the next round. Really cool, really neat. My number 5 board game, published from 2001 to 2004, Amun-Re. And now we move on to my number 4 board game, published from 2001 to 2004. And again, this might be many people's favorite game from this time period, and that is Puerto Rico, designed by Andreas Seyfarth and published by Rio Grande Games. And for many years, this was the number 1 ranked game on BoardGameGeek.com. I am pretty sure it's still ranked in the top 30, definitely the top 40 on BGG. And we're talking about almost 20 years later, folks. This is an amazing game that introduced mechanisms like action selection, variable phase order, the concept of filling up a ship with certain goods, supply and demand, in order to sell it for victory points. Really cool, neat things. Love the variable phase order and how you have to pick your actions based on what you think other players will pick in order to time it rightly, so that on your future or next turns, you might be able to select the exact thing that you need that will benefit you more than any other player. Really cool, really a thinking person's game. Lots of strategy, very few luck. I do have to admit, I do not like the poor production quality in even some of the more modern reprints, even some of the more beautiful reprints that I've seen, not my copy. I still feel that they're kind of subpar for today and even to some extent for back then standards. But as far as gameplay is concerned, this game leaves very little to be lacking. And the only reason it finished number 4 is because of how much I like my top 3. My number 4 board game published from 2001 to 2004, Puerto Rico. And now we move on to my number 3 board game published from 2001 to 2004, and that is Memoir 44, designed by Richard Borg and published by Days of Wonder Games. This is yet another Days of Wonder Games board game on my list, so you could tell that they were on fire, they were hot, they were sizzling during this time frame. And this game here is basically part of Richard Borg's Command and Colors system of 2-player war games, and this was his second game within the system. It was one of the earliest ones, and in particular it focuses on World War II. And this game has more expansion content than any other of the games within this gaming system. You have so much content to recreate almost every possible battle within almost any possible theater of war that took place during World War II times. You have a scenario book that gives you specific situations, specific units and where they need to be placed, specific topography and terrain tiles that you place to set up the board according to that particular battle, and even a few little scenario particular rules that determine how players win, who has the advantage, and so on and so forth. Gameplay is amazing. It's a combination of hand management that determines what units you can order and what sides of the battlefield you can trigger, with a little bit of dice rolling to roll for resolution, to get your hits, to attack your opponent's armies. However, even the dice rolling can be a little bit strategic because there are some units that are more likely to roll for hits than others. So that's something to factor in when you're making your decision. Now, I love and adore this game. The only reason it's not higher is because it's not my favorite iteration in this system of games, Command and Colors. Perhaps it would have jumped up a spot or two. But for now, it's my number 3 board game published from 2001 to 2004, Memoir 44. Now we move on to my number 2 board game published from 2001 to 2004, and that is Carcassonne, the Castle. Now, Carcassonne, the original, was published in the year 2000, so it doesn't qualify for this list. But even if it did, it probably would not have surpassed Carcassonne, the Castle, which I believe right now is my favorite iteration of the Carcassonne system. And it's one of the few within that system that was not designed by Klaus-Jürgen Wrede. Instead, it was designed by Reiner Knizia, another Reiner Knizia game within this time frame. This is an awesome 2-player only variant of Carcassonne that has the board enclosed within the confines of a walled castle. So that adds a new element to it. It also has lots of different spots that you could start off from the very beginning of the game. So even early on in the game, you feel like you have lots of options, as opposed to typical Carcassonne, that because of the reduced, smaller landscape, the game actually starts with very few options. I love the slight nuanced differences between this and regular Carcassonne, factoring in who has the biggest house so that you could score for all the empty spots on the board, and there will be tons of empty spots at the end of the game. You're also trying to sometimes manipulate the score, particularly so that you can move along the score track in ways that let you land exactly on one of the corner spaces of the castle's wall, because if you land on one of those corner spaces, you earn a bonus tile, and that bonus tile actually is very helpful and helps you to score additional points for one or another of your features. Really cool game. I love Carcassonne. We're a Carcassonne family in this household, and this implementation of Carcassonne is the best one I've ever tasted. My number 2 board game published from 2001 to 2004, Carcassonne, the Castle. And that's it. We're finally at my number 1. My number 1 board game, and I believe it might be the highest. Is definitely one of the highest ranked. Maybe Puerto Rico might be the only one that's ranked higher on BoardGameGeek.com, but this is definitely my number 1 board game published from this time frame, and that is Power Grid, designed by Friedemann Friese and published by Rio Grande Games. I absolutely love this game. This game is a longer game. Even at 2 players, it goes north of an hour and a half. And even so, I love and adore it. At 3 players, it's very, very rich. I've yet to play in bigger groups. I want to play 4 and 5 player games. I do own the robot expansion that turns the 2-player game into a multiplayer game. And even so, that robot expansion can theoretically be used for higher player counts to add an additional player. With programmed, decisions and so on and so forth for all the phases of this game. This game combines so many neat mechanisms. You have route network building, which I absolutely love. You have resource management with the different resources that power up your factories. You have money manipulation. You have money, lots of income that you're earning throughout the game and spending to acquire different things. You have auction bidding for the different power plants throughout the game. So that's really, really, really cool. So all of these really cool, intricate mechanisms that are interwoven in such a neat way that doesn't feel burdensome, that doesn't feel overdone, that doesn't feel unnecessary. It feels like a really smooth game. And Freedom and Freeze likes to play around with lots of different mechanisms sometimes, and it feels like, a homage to his creativity. But this game just feels right. It feels like this is the way a board game is supposed to be. And I just absolutely love it. I love the fact that it has tons of different content and expansions for this game, different maps from different countries, different continents throughout the globe. And each of these maps add a few little wrinkles to the rules to make things a little bit different. There is lots of expansion content. There's a stock market content. There's a fabled fruit, almost legacy type of expansion out there. There are expansions to the power plants if you want to vary up the power plants and you get bored with them. So much content. I can never get tired of this. One of my favorite games, one of the favorite games in this household. My #1 board game published from 2001 to 2004, Power Grid. And that's it, folks. Comment down below. Tell me what you think about my top 10 games from this period. Do you agree with my selections? Do you disagree? Which game are you surprised that it made it to the top 10? Which game are you surprised that's been left out? Perhaps I haven't played it. Perhaps I did, but it didn't give me the same first impression that it gave you. I'm interested to read what you guys have to say. Well, this is Harry from When Harry Met Board Games saying thank you for joining us. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.